Have you ever noticed that the most emotionally powerful people aren't those who seem like emotionless robots, but rather those who maintain a disturbing calm even amidst chaos? Think about it for a second. While most people explode at the slightest provocation, lose sleep over an unanswered message, or panic when faced with an obstacle, there are those who simply don't flinch. And no, they weren't born that way. The truth is much deeper and, honestly, much more accessible than you might imagine. Carl Jung, one of the greatest psychologists who ever lived, dedicated his life to unraveling the mysteries of the human mind and arrived at a conclusion that few dare to accept. We do untruly live until we find ourselves. That's right. Most people spend decades on this planet being controlled by invisible forces that operate behind the scenes of their own psyche. These are fears that come from places you don't even remember anymore. Inherited behavioral patterns, emotions that are triggered without you understanding why. And the most frightening thing, the vast majority die without ever having faced these forces head-on. They die being puppets of themselves. Have you ever experienced this? That moment when you react in a completely disproportionate way and then think, why did I do that? That's not who I am. Well, Jung would say that at that instant, you weren't in control. It was something much older, much deeper. It was your shadow speaking louder. And here is the secret that separates ordinary people from those who radiate emotional control and strategic coolness. Powerful people have and suppress their emotions. They've found themselves, have made peace with their own inner demons. Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover today can completely transform how you see your own emotional reactions and, most importantly, how you deal with them. We're talking about the psychology of coldness. Yes, but not the superficial coldness of someone who merely hides what they feel. We're talking about something much deeper, total mastery over your own inner world. And that only happens when you stop running away from who you really are and begin the most important journey of your life, the journey back to yourself. Jung called this individuation. It's the process by which you cease to be a collection of others' expectations, unresolved traumas, and uncontrolled impulses, and finally become a complete individual. Someone who knows their shadows so well that they can no longer dominate them. Someone who has developed emotional control not because they repress what they feel, but because they perfectly understand the origin of each feeling that arises. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because it goes against everything popular psychology preaches. It's not about toxic positivity. It's not about pretending everything is okay, much less about becoming a heartless person. It is about something infinitely more powerful. It is about waking up to the reality of who you truly are, without masks, without filters, without comforting lies. And only then, after this silent awakening, does life truly begin. Because for the first time, you are in control. So tell me one thing. Are you ready to start truly living? Or will you continue to be controlled by forces you don't even know? Because from now on, we are going to dive deep into this journey that Jung mapped out and that very few people have the courage to complete. Before we continue, I need to make a request that goes beyond the algorithm, beyond the numbers. If what I've shared so far has made you stop and think, if in some way you saw yourself in this reflection on whether or not you are in control of your own life, leave a comment below about what touched you most in this idea of Jung. It can be a word, a phrase, your own experience. I read every comment, truly. And often these exchanges below become as valuable as the video itself. When you share your perspective, you not only help the channel grow and reach more people who need to hear this, but you also create a community of people who are truly seeking genuine psychological growth, not those ready-made recipes of shallow self-help that infest the internet. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now's the time, because every week I delve into these topics that everyone avoids, these issues that bother people, that shake up their internal structures, that reveal truths about personal power and emotional mastery that most prefer not to face. Your subscription isn't just a click, it's a vote of confidence in this kind of profound content. It's you saying, I want more of this in my life. And of course, if you can leave a like, it really helps the video reach those who truly need this message. Your participation here is literally what keeps all this going. Now, back to what really matters. Let's talk about the most uncomfortable, but also the most liberating part of this journey that Jung proposed. Because understanding that you need to find yourself is one thing, but actually diving into that process is something completely different. And this is where most people give up. This is where people retreat and return to the comfort zone of unconsciousness. Because what comes next requires courage. It requires you to look at what you've spent your whole life avoiding. Because what comes next requires courage. It requires you to look at what you've spent your whole life avoiding. Jung gave a name to this part of you that lives hidden in the background of your psyche. He called it the shadow. And no, it's not just an abstract concept in psychology. The shadow is real, it's active, and it's operating within you at this very moment, influencing every decision you make, every reaction you have, every pattern you repeat without understanding why. Think about it. Since childhood, you've been conditioned to hide certain parts of yourself. Maybe it was anger, because nice boys don't get angry. Maybe it was vulnerability, because men don't cry. Or perhaps ambition, because you need to be humble. Whatever it was, you learned early on that some emotions, some impulses, some desires were unacceptable. So what did you do? You pushed them under the psychological rug. You locked them in the basement of your consciousness, and you thought it was resolved. But here is the brutal truth that Jung discovered, and that changes everything. What you reject in yourself doesn't disappear. It grows stronger in the darkness. Those impulses you've repressed since you were 5, 6, 10 years old, they grew deep down, fed on your denial, and now they control you in ways you can't even imagine. That's the hidden power of the shadow. It's formed by everything you've decided you can't be, and precisely for that reason, it becomes the most influential force in your life. That's why you suddenly explode at someone you love. That's why you feel that paralyzing anxiety without being able to identify a clear cause. That's why you make completely self-sabotaging decisions and then look back thinking, what on earth was I thinking? You weren't thinking, your shadow was in control. And the worst part, as long as you don't recognize this, as long as you don't face this rejected part of yourself, you will continue to be a puppet of your own repressed emotions. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because here lies the fundamental difference between those who have genuine emotional control and those who only pretend to have it. Most people, when they hear about the shadow, about these dark aspects of personality, the first reaction is to try to suppress them even more. They think, so I need to better control these bad impulses. Wrong, completely wrong. That's exactly what creates the problem. The more you try to push your shadow away, the stronger it becomes. It's like trying to hold a ball underwater. The more force you exert, the more violent the explosion when it finally escapes your control. Weak people, those who live on a constant emotional roller coaster, are the ones who are in perpetual war with their own shadow. They think that being strong means denying, repressing, hiding, but the truly powerful ones, those who radiate that controlled coolness that impresses, they did the opposite. They had the courage to go down to the basement, turn on the light, and look face to face at everything they had hidden from themselves for years. This is real transformation. It's not that superficial motivational story of think positive or ignore the haters. It's a deep dive into your own inner darkness. It's recognizing that yes, anger exists within you. Yes, envy, pride, fear, lust for power, deep insecurity exists. All of that exists. And you know what happens when you finally accept this? When you integrate your shadow instead of fighting it, it stops controlling you. You stop being surprised by your own reactions. You develop that unwavering calm that comes from knowing every corner of your own mind. Jung wasn't kidding when he said that the journey of individuation necessarily involves confronting the shadow. He knew that this is the most difficult, most painful, but also the most liberating stage, because it is only after making peace with your inner demons that you truly take control. It is only after recognizing the full range of who you are, including the parts that shame you, that you can consciously choose how to act. That is true power. That is authentic emotional mastery. The mindset that separates those who evolve from those who stagnate lies precisely here, in the courage to look inward without comforting lies. And if you're beginning to realize that you may have spent years running from your own shadow, know that this revelation is already the first step. The awakening has already begun. Comment below, I recognize my shadow. That's all. It's a commitment you make to yourself to stop running and start truly finding yourself. Because recognizing the shadow is only the beginning. What comes next is what Jung considered the most important journey a human being can make in life. He called this process individuation, and it is here that true transformation happens. It's not an instant awakening, not a magical insight that solves everything overnight. It's a gradual, sometimes painful, but profoundly liberating journey where you cease to be a puppet controlled by invisible strings and finally become the master of your own inner destiny. Think about your life so far. How many of your decisions were truly your own? How many times have you acted out of fear of others' opinions, social pressure, or expectations you don't even know where they came from? How many times have you felt anger and simply reacted, without conscious choice, as if a button had been pressed and you were forced to execute that emotional program? That's living on autopilot. That's living governed by forces you do uncontrolled because you never stopped to truly understand them. Individuation is the process of regaining that control. But beware, because here lies a huge misconception that most people make when they hear about self-knowledge. It's not about becoming an improved version of yourself, eliminating flaws and polishing virtues. It's not about transforming into some idealized, perfect version that society approves of. It's exactly the opposite. It's about accepting the totality of who you are, including, and especially, the parts you've always rejected. Jung had a fascinating metaphor for this. He compared the individuation process to alchemy, that ancient art of transforming lead into gold. But it wasn't about transforming metals. It was a psychological metaphor. Lead represents everything you consider low, vile, undesirable in yourself. The anger you feel and judge as weakness, the fear you hide because it seems cowardly, the envy that corrodes you from within but that you would never admit to feeling, the desire for power that shames you because it does unfit the image you want to project of a humble person. Now comes the twist. Alchemists knew that you don't transform lead into gold by rejecting the lead. You work with it. You immerse yourself in it. You understand its nature, its composition, and through this profound process of acceptance and integration, transformation happens. That's how it works with the human psyche, too. You don't become emotionally powerful by rejecting anger, fear, or desire. You become powerful when you accept that these forces exist within you, when you stop fighting against them and begin to consciously integrate them into your total personality. This is the difference between superficial emotional control and genuine emotional mastery. The person who merely represses is constantly in internal conflict, expending psychic energy trying to keep the lid on the pressure cooker. Eventually it explodes. Eventually, the shadow leaks out in destructive ways. But the person who has undergone individuation, they don't need to repress anything because they already know every corner of their own mind. They know exactly what they feel, why they feel it, and consciously choose how to respond. That is authentic composure. That is real power. And look how interesting when you stop being afraid of your own emotions. When you integrate even the darkest aspects of yourself, something magical happens. You stop projecting. You know that person who deeply irritates you for no apparent reason. Usually it's because they are expressing some aspect of yourself that you have repressed. You see in them what you don't accept in yourself. But when you individuate, when you accept your totality, other people stop having that power over you. You develop that calm and unwavering presence that makes others wonder, how can this person be so centered? The truth is, these people weren't born this way. They did the inner work that most don't have the courage to do. They went down to the basement, faced the monsters, and discovered that the monsters were just rejected parts of themselves, waiting to be recognized and integrated. And after this journey through the backstage of their own psyche, they emerged different, not because they eliminated their shadows, but because they transformed them into allies. Jung said that the goal of individuation is not perfection, but completeness. It's about becoming whole, recognizing and accepting the full range of what it means to be human. And when you reach that place of radical self-acceptance, you finally stop being a slave to external circumstances. You stop needing the validation of others because you have validated yourself. You stop reacting impulsively because you know your triggers so well that they no longer catch you by surprise. This is what separates those who have truly evolved from those who only pretend to have evolved. Comment below, seeking completeness, if this idea of total integration resonates with you, because accepting your shadows and integrating all parts of yourself still leaves a question hanging in the air, a question that many people ask themselves when they begin to understand this process. If I accept my anger, my fear, my darkest impulses, doesn't that mean I will become a slave to them? If I stop repressing them, won't I simply explode and lose all control? And this is where one of the most fascinating and counterintuitive paradoxes of all Jungian psychology lies. True emotional detachment, the kind that impresses and commands respect, doesn't come from suppressing what you feel. It comes from knowing your emotions so deeply, so intimately, that they simply can no longer take you by surprise. Think of a high-level chess player when facing an opponent. He doesn't get nervous with every unexpected move. Do you know why? Because he's played 1,000 games. He's seen practically every possible opening variation, every trap, every strategic sacrifice. When the opponent makes an aggressive move, the chess player doesn't react emotionally because that pattern is already familiar. He recognizes it instantly, assesses the consequences, and chooses the most appropriate response. It's not that he feels nothing, it's that his deep knowledge of the game puts him in a position of total strategic control. That's exactly how it works with your emotions after you go through the individuation process. You know your own patterns, your triggers, your automatic reactions so well that when a situation arises that used to make you explode, now you simply recognize what's happening internally. You see the anger arising, you identify exactly which aspect of your shadow has been activated. And then, here's the key, you consciously choose how to respond. That's absolute inner mastery. It's not the absence of emotion, it's mastery over it. Most people confuse emotional control with insensitivity. They think that being cold means not feeling, becoming a kind of impermeable robot. But that's a completely superficial and honestly stupid understanding of what it means to have true emotional power. The most powerful people you'll ever meet aren't those who feel nothing. They're those who feel deeply, but who have developed the ability to choose when and how to express what they feel. That's a colossal difference. When you repress emotions, you are essentially pretending they don't exist. You push them under the rug and hope they stay quiet there. But repressed emotions are like a river blocked by a dam. The pressure builds, until eventually the dam breaks and everything comes to the surface all at once, chaotically and destructively. When you integrate your emotions, when you know them deeply through individuation, it's as if you've built strategic channels for that river. The water continues to flow, the energy remains present, but now you consciously direct where it goes. This completely changes the mindset of how you operate in the world. Imagine being in a work meeting and someone publicly disrespects you. The average person, who doesn't know themselves, who hasn't gone through this process, will react instantly. Either they explode right then and there, or they swallow hard and brood over it for days, letting the repressed anger poison everything around them. But someone who is that person feels the anger arising, recognizes exactly what is happening, understands that it touched a sensitive point in their ego, and then makes a conscious choice. Maybe they respond firmly right away. Maybe they strategically choose not to give it a platform, but whatever the decision, it comes from a place of conscious power. not automatic reaction. This is the real impact of self-discovery, as Jung proposed. You stop being a collection of programmed reactions and become a conscious agent of your own life. And here's an interesting revelation. When you reach this level of self-knowledge, the things that used to deeply affect you begin to lose their power over you, not because you've become insensitive, but because you understand the inner workings of your own psychological functioning so well that you recognize the patterns before they overwhelm you. It's like watching a movie for the 10th time. You can still appreciate it, you can still get involved, but you're no longer surprised by the plot twists because you already know every turn. It's the same with your emotions. When you've explored every corner of your own psyche, when you've confronted your deepest shadows, when you've mapped your most intimate fears and desires, you develop that unwavering calm that comes from profound knowledge. And then, yes, you have true coldness, not the dead coldness of someone disconnected from their own humanity, but the strategic coldness of someone who perfectly knows the inner terrain and knows exactly how to navigate it. The journey to that place isn't easy, and it certainly isn't quick, but the alternative is spending your whole life being surprised by yourself, controlled by forces you don't even know, reacting instead of acting. And that, my friend, is prison. Comment below. I consciously choose. If you're beginning to understand that true power isn't about not feeling, but about choosing how to act with what you feel. But I know you must be thinking, okay, I understand the concept. I understand the importance of knowing myself deeply, of integrating my shadow, of developing this genuine emotional control. But how do I begin? How do I move from theory to the real practice of this transformation? Because it's one thing to intellectually understand what Jung proposed, and quite another to implement it in your life in a concrete and tangible way. And this is where most people get stuck. They consume the knowledge, feel that initial impulse for change, but don't know where to start and end up returning to the same old patterns. Jung wasn't just a distant theorist talking about abstract concepts. He lived this process firsthand, descended into the darkest places of his own psyche, and developed specific practices that anyone can use to begin this journey of individuation. And let me tell you, these practices are surprisingly simple in concept, but profoundly challenging in execution, because they demand something that very few people are willing to offer: brutal honesty with oneself. The first practice Jung used, and which he considered fundamental, was what we might call a shadow diary. Every day, without exception, you take a notebook, open to a blank page, and write something about yourself that shames you, that bothers you, that you would normally hide, even from yourself. It could be a thought you had and judged as horrible. It could be an emotion that arose and contradicts the image you want to project. It could be a dark desire you feel but would never admit to anyone. The secret here is not just writing, but writing and looking at it without judgment, without trying to justify it, without making excuses, just recognizing this exists within me. Does it seem simple? Try doing it for a week and you'll understand how uncomfortable it is, because we spend our whole lives constructing a narrative about who we are, a story that paints us as the well-intentioned heroes of our own lives. And when you start writing about your shadows daily, that narrative begins to crack. You begin to see that you're not as noble as you'd like to believe, that you have petty impulses, that you feel envy, that sometimes you act out of pure selfishness disguised as virtue. And this revelation, however uncomfortable it may be, is the first real step towards genuine self-knowledge. The second practice is what Jung would call analyzing emotional triggers. Every time you lose emotional control, and you will, because you're human, instead of simply moving on or dwelling on what happened, you stop and ask yourself a specific question. What part of me was activated here? It's not about blaming the other person or the situation. It's about understanding which aspect of your psyche was touched. If someone questioned your competence and you felt disproportionate anger, perhaps it's because there's a deep insecurity about your own worth that you've never confronted. If you felt paralyzing anxiety in the face of an opportunity, perhaps it's because there's a fear of failure rooted in some old experience that you've buried. The impact of this practice is enormous because it transforms every emotional outburst, every moment of loss of control, into a learning opportunity. Instead of simply reacting and forgetting, you are actively mapping the territory of your own psyche. Over time, you begin to recognize patterns. You realize that certain situations always trigger the same reactions. And when you understand the underlying reasons, these situations lose their power over you. You stop being surprised because you already know the script. And here comes the third practice, which at first glance may seem completely crazy, but which Jung considered one of the most powerful conscious internal dialogue. Jung literally talked to his own emotions as if they were separate people. When he felt anger, he didn't try to suppress it. He personified that anger, gave it a voice, and asked, "What do you want to tell me? What are you trying to protect? Why did you appear now?" And then he listened. He let that part of himself speak without censorship. This sounds crazy to those who have never experienced it, but it's pure genius when you understand what's happening. Your emotions aren't random enemies trying to sabotage you. They are messengers from parts of your psyche that need to be heard. When you dialogue with them instead of fighting them, you integrate those parts. You discover that anger is trying to protect your boundaries, that fear is trying to keep you safe, that envy is pointing to legitimate desires you've repressed. And when you understand the message, you can act consciously instead of reacting automatically. These three practices together form a ritual of self-knowledge that, if applied consistently, has the power to completely transform your relationship with your own emotions. Not overnight, not magically, but gradually, solidly, and profoundly. Comment below, starting today, if you are truly going to implement at least one of these practices in your life from now on. And look, if you've made it this far, to this point in the conversation, that already says a lot about you. Most people give up halfway through when the subject starts to get uncomfortable, when the truths start to bother them, but you stayed. And that means you're truly willing to take this journey back to yourself. So I want to extend an invitation to you. If this type of content resonates with you, if you want to continue exploring these themes that go beyond shallow motivational topics, subscribe to the channel, because every week I bring you these deep conversations about the psychology of power, about emotional mastery, about the inner workings of the human mind that most people prefer to ignore. And I know you're not one of those people. You've proven that by staying this far. And comment below, I went all the way. That's all. It's a way for you to mark this moment, to tell yourself that you truly absorbed this message and that you are committed to this process of self-discovery. Furthermore, when you comment, when you interact, you help this type of content reach more people who need to hear it. And let's face it, there are many people out there who urgently need to understand that life only truly begins when you find yourself. If you could also leave a like, it makes all the difference. It's not just a number. It's you saying that this conversation was worthwhile, that these ideas resonated with something deep within you. And that motivates me to continue bringing this type of content that demands research, reflection, and the courage to talk about things that bother us.